theme of this lecture is the civilization on Venus. People will find it strange that there's life on this planet which we think is very hot and no possibility for life, but we always think from our perspective and our view, our limited ability to sense from our senses is just useful on this plane that we are on, not on other dimensions. So we cannot sense other dimension with our limited 5 senses. So I want to start with an interesting and a very nice poem called Venus Home Star. Cities of light, days without night, cities of gold, days without old, reasons of pure, entity sure, love and to feel, life and what's real. Wordless and silent and free just to be, true to life's spirit, not the me, but the we. Cities of light, living by right, love rules our land and we offer our hand. This is a telling poem about the mentality and the civilization on Venus and their assistance and help to planet Earth. This is the most developed civilization on in our solar system and one of the founders of mankind. And they have left the physical plane and everything that we feel and sense on our level, and is on the etheric physical plane, and some would call it the astral plane, or the higher etheric plane. It varies according to the sources for this information. But the thing is, nothing on this dimensional plane is seen or registered by us, because everything there vibrates on a higher frequency and is in another dimension. This is an interdimensional civilization that can come go down to our level or stay in their higher level, and then everything there is unseen by us. We can look at ourselves, the human being. We consist so much more than the physical body, which we observe and see. We have an emotional body, a mental body, a causal body, while all the experiences that the soul gathers through all our incarnations are stored, and an etheric body. And when we are asleep, we leave this plane and is on the astral plane or in another dimension. So we leave this dimension every night. It's nothing we think 1 second of, but we do a dimensional shift. And we do a greater dimensional shift when we leave this physical plane for good. When we die and leave the physical body, it's a great dimensional shift there, that we live in another existence and then return when our time for the next incarnation is there. And when it's a law of analogy that says that everything that exists in the lower also exists in the higher. For example, around an atom, the electrons are moving, and like the same in the solar system, you have the nucleus and the atoms around, and you have the sun and the planets circling around the sun. And since we are multidimensional, the universe is also multidimensional and consists of many dimensions. And this is nothing special, that's just an alternative view or some fringe way of seeing things. This is more and more accepted, and it's a more and more common view of the ordinary science. That the astrophysicist says that we know there are many dimensions, but you don't know how many. And we know there are parallel universes, but they don't know how many. One of the Venusians that has left the plane that this person was on and got down to our level is a Venusian called Omnec Onec. I'm going to tell more about her. But according to information coming from her, the yellow race, the Asian race, comes from Mars. And the red, the Indian race, comes from the planet Saturn. And the white European race comes from Venus. And the black, so the Negro race, comes from Jupiter. So therefore, there are many different varieties of humans that looks very, very different on the same planet. And nobody can explain why. And nobody can explain and find the missing link between the ape and the human being. Because we are seeded from outside. Or mankind comes from an external source and is planted here and is seeded here on this planet. We don't come from the apes like Darwin says. Here we have a very interesting photo of the planet Venus to the left, like we see it when we view it or take photos of it. And to the right we see the planet Venus as a Venusian sees it, in the dimension that the Venusians live in. And that's a very, very different thing. You see it's almost lifeless, and it vibrates and it's full of colors, and you see a huge difference between the Venus that we see from our perspective and the Venusian dimension that they are in. And according to information from Omnec Onec, these individuals are 2 to 2.5 meters tall. They have long blonde hair, or blue and green eyes. This is most of them look like this. And the hands are broad with long, narrow fingers, and it's like shaking hands with a baby. And they have an unusual high forehead with large, wide-set eyes. And when they are between 20 and 30, the aging stops and they become many hundreds of years old. And they move by floating just above the ground. They don't walk like we do. This is quite interesting because we're going to see some more about... come back to that later. And they have a long history of contact with humanity. And the Maya legend, it's about the Quetzalcoatl or Kukulkan, the tall man with blonde hair, blue eyes and fair skin. Typical Nordic looking. And Nordic is only a description of appearance. Nordics can come from the Pleiades or Venus. One of the stars in the Pleiades is called Maya with M-I-E-A, and it's probably the Maya culture was inspired by several extraterrestrial races, both Venusians and from the Pleiades. One of the most experienced UFO researchers that has been here, he left this world in 2010, his name was Wendell Stevens. And according to his over 60-year experience, he says there are 2 groups of extraterrestrials that have a special interest in us. And one of these groups are the Nordics. The Venusians are also behind some of the crop formations. The Venusian type of crop formations, where we often see the 5-pointed star depicted in a crop formation, because when we look at planet Venus and it moves in the heavens, from our perspective, the planet Earth, which also moves, but the planet Venus is nearer to the Sun, and a retrograde planet, it moves in the opposite direction of the Earth. And if you look at Venus over an 8-year period, it will become a pattern as a 5-pointed star. So the 5-pointed star is very, very commonly seen in crop formations. We see examples of this here. And exactly the same star like that's made in the heavens by the movements of Venus. And the symbolism of the 5-pointed star is very interesting, because this 5-pointed star is found in all cultures all over the world. Because the Venusians have a very, very profound and widespread influence on our world. And we see that the American flag has the 5-pointed star in it. And on a low level, a personality level, it symbolizes a desire to secure and serve one's own interests, to control and to dominate. The US wants to have their interests served in all parts of the world, and they have 800 foreign bases all over, and 200 which nobody knows about, which is our secret. So they have tried to control and influence all parts of the world and secure their interests. But on a high level, on a soul level, we see it's in the serve the interest of the planet and of humanity, and give unconditional love, help and aid for the planet Earth and all the kingdoms that are here. The animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, the human kingdom. And the spiritual kingdom, which is the fifth kingdom, which is above the human kingdom, where the masters of wisdom are, that they call, are, and they don't have anything to learn, and they are here to help and guide us and oversee the evolution of the planet, and they also cooperate with the extraterrestrials and Venusians and other extraterrestrial races, because they are both on the same mission to help planet Earth. Here is another example that Venus is depicted in a crop formation. This passage of Venus that's happened in 2012. And here we see a very interesting and very profound symbolism, because we see the Celtic cross, the symbol for the Christianity, and we also see Venus as the 5-pointed star, and they are both there at the same time in the crop, in the fields, in Wiltshire. Because the influence from our spiritual hierarchy through Jesus, which inaugurated the Age of Vices 2000 years ago, and with this very simple, profound message of kindness and love, which we have never been able to live up to. And we also see at the same time, 2000 years ago, Quetzalcoatl and the Maya culture was flourishing, that these two great spiritual figures were out in the open and working among humanity at the same time, influencing us and trying to help us and lift us spiritually. Now, both Maitreya, the teacher for our age, and the leader of the Nordics, is about to appear at the same time and come more and more and more into public view and into the open. That's a process that's been going on for many years, since Maitreya came to London in 1977. And from 2010 until now, he's been interviewed on television all over the world over 100 times, but he doesn't say anything about who he is at the moment. But eventually he will declare himself as the teacher for all humanity and the Lord of Love. And then also the extraterrestrials will show up and come out from behind the scenes. That will happen. These things happen simultaneously. It's just two parallel lines working, movement out in the open. Externalization of the hierarchy and externalization of our extraterrestrial friends, our space friends. They are among us in 3 different ways. There are different type of cross-traveling back to the Venusians. The first way is that they make a physical manifestation using the same etherical astral body that they use on Venus. And on the 6th of July 2009 at 5 AM, a policeman was driving near Silbury Hill in Wiltshire and discovered 3 figures standing out in the fields. 3 very tall, with white clothes and very blonde, long hair, and they had this broad hands, like the description of the Venusians is broad hands, and they fit perfect the description of a Venusian that was given earlier here. And the interesting thing was that when this policeman walked out of the car and approached them, they just looked at him, and then he went nearer, and then they disappeared, and they floated away very, very rapidly. They didn't walk or run. Nobody could catch them like the best runner in the world, because they floated above the ground like the Venusians move. So you see that there were also a crop formation there, coming where they are in the field that they inspected. The second way is that they manifest the physical body like a master of wisdom can do. He can manifest his physical body by thought, which appears and disappears. And these Venusians that are much, much more developed spiritually and than us, they can manifest the physical body also to fulfill a certain mission. And one of them who did that was called Valiant Thor, and he landed with his spaceship and crew in Virginia in the US in 1957, and was led by the police to Eisenhower and the Vice President Nixon. And between 1957 and 60 he stayed in the Pentagon and came and went as he pleased. And he said to Eisenhower that we can help you get rid of all poverty and inspire you to make better conditions for everybody on this planet. Help you to make a better world for everybody. But we have you have to get rid of all atomic weapons. Unless you do that, we cannot help you. That was absolute necessity. But they weren't willing to listen. So they continued, and continues today with, as we all know, the development of the use of atomic energy and also the atomic weapons. So he had to go away. He went away in 1960 without having done what he wanted to do and try to inspire us. And Harley Bird is one. He worked with the Project Blue Book, and he was a cousin of the Admiral Byrd. He said that this is the first landing that we U.S. Authorities can it's a real landing of an extraterrestrial.
Confirm?
That we can confirm, yes. And he also met Frank Strange, which was his contact person. He was both a priest and a contact person for Venusians, for Valiant Thor. And now, today, this story about the Valiant Thor and his mission is about to be filmed. The film is called Stranger at the Pentagon. There's another thing. The Eisenhower said that if we take your advice into account and try to do something along these lines, it will destroy the American economy. So that was also a very important reason why they didn't heed his advice. Here we see his crew, the Jill and Don and Valiant Thor, a photo of them. And the Victor 1, the spaceship that they came from to this planet from Venus, and also the book by Frank Strange called Stranger at the Pentagon. Another very famous man who has influenced this civilization and modern civilization, maybe being the founder of modern civilization, you can call him, who also was a Venusian is Nikola Tesla. He claimed that he came from Venus himself, and Omnec Onec, which I will tell a little bit more afterwards about more. She also says he was a Venusian. And also a man called Arthur Matthews, who was a friend of Tesla, and who Tesla trusted many of his inventions and papers to be. His project was to be developed further by Arthur Matthews. And Arthur Matthews met Venusians many times. They landed on his property 10 times between 1942 and 62. Every second year there was a landing. And the Venusians that came and to see how Tesla's ideas were developed by Matthews, they also said that Tesla was a Venusian. And Tesla's hearing was 13 times as good as a normal human being. He could hear the ticking of a clock 3 rooms from where he was. And his working hours was from 10 a.m. in the morning until 5 a.m. the next morning. 7 days a week. So he worked almost around the clock, week after week. No human being is able to do that. From 10 a.m. in the forenoon till 5 a.m. the next morning. So that's some of the things that, and also his contribution, all his extremely advanced inventions. And one very remarkable thing about Tesla was that he could, in his mind, make he didn't have any prototypes or built any models. He made all the constructions in his head mentally and tested them also mentally without building anything. And when this testing and construction mentally was finished, the project was, the invention was made, and it worked all the time. He did that over and over again for 20 years. And he had 1,100 inventions. 100 of them are in use today. And many of them are in use but claimed by others. And he cooperated with Thomas Alva Edison, which has been, according to history books, the founder of the inventor of the light bulb. But it's a lot of many things says that it was the Tesla who was the real inventor. But Thomas Alva Edison took his ideas and claimed this as his own and became the big inventor in the history books. One remarkable invention also the Tesla made was the Tesla scope. It was conceived by him in 1898 and was built in 1918 and developed further by Arthur Matthews. And here we see a picture of the Tesla scope and Arthur Matthews when in his old age. And the Tesla scope was an invention that was meant to be a tool for communication with the planet Venus. So every time the Venusian landed on Arthur Matthews' property, by Tesla scope, he was told when they come. So they prepared him before every landing, and he communicated with this Tesla scope that was made by Tesla himself for communicating with Venus and with Venusian spaceships. So Tesla is the world's greatest inventor, at least 100 years ahead of his time. And he was also inventor of the alternate current, which we use, and which is the way electricity is utilized by us. So we see we had this modern civilization is founded by Tesla, by a Venusian. So that's also an interesting thing that's not been said so much about. We have told about 2 ways that the Venusians use for manifesting themselves here. And Tesla came here as a 1-year-old baby and grew up here as among us. The extreme way is a big sacrifice, and very few individuals do it that way, because it implies a lot of suffering. And this is the way Omnec Onec came to this world. She came as a 5-year-old girl in a spaceship from Venus, and took the identity of a 5-year-old girl who was called Sheila Gibson, who died in a bus accident. And the Venusians knew exactly when this would happen and how this would happen, and they were there, and the corpse of this small girl was removed and replaced with Omnec Onec. This small girl was on her way to her grandmother, because she was a result of a teenage pregnancy, and her mother could not take care of her. So she should stay at her grandmother for a few years. And therefore the grandmother met this girl and took care of this girl, which was not the girl that was sent away. It was Omnec Onec. And when as a child, Omnec Onec excuse me, she was 7-year-old. She came here in 1955, and when she grew up as a child, she could answer almost every question she was asked about. She had a knowledge which was beyond understanding for a child, because she is much more developed person spiritually, which has chosen to sacrifice to be among us in this incarnation only. She has written 3 books. From Venus I Came was the first book, where she tells about the life on what she says called astral level, on higher astral level on Venus. Some would call it the etheric level. And how it came about that she came here, and how this process, which I've said a little bit about, the planning and how in detail, and how the hardships she has been suffering here, and she's had a very rough and tough life. She has this book called the Venusian Trilogy, which is From Venus I Came, and Angels Don't Cry, which is her self-biography, and My Message, which is her spiritual wisdom, which is very, very interesting information, very profound and inspiring work, which we all can learn a lot if we make it our own, and if we practice the teachings that she conveys to us. Another which we know about came here in 1960 was called Venus, and took the identity of a 26-year-old female who had just died, female singer. She lived first anonymously among us, and then she became a more well-known person for a while, and disappeared completely, and we have not been heard of since 1982. Between 1974 and 81, she walked 2,857 miles through 290 cities. So she said, to enlighten this planet with love. She learned to play the guitar, and she stood. She lived from hand to mouth without hardly any money, and she stood out in the snow when it was snowing heavily, and did hitchhiked, and the cars that came by and the drivers became very angry at her, some of them, because it's very provocative. They couldn't understand why somebody could do this voluntarily, and so we see that she was on a mission from a very high level. Don't do this unless you are you have inspiration from your higher self, or from a soul level. The reasons behind visits is to contact people in leading position, presidents, not only Eisenhower, but Gerald Ford and other American presidents has also been visited by extraterrestrials, or by Venusians, at least 2 times. And they contribute with their spiritual wisdom and show by example unconditional love. And they inform us that other planets in our solar system are inhabited. There is life there. And they create the crop formations and show their craft in order to give us inspiration and tell us that we are not alone. And by showing their craft, their extraterrestrial spacecraft, people also very often feel, they become very uplifted. They get a very kind of spiritual nourishment from the energy that they're filled with when the spaceship is there. And Venus is the light carrier for this planet, according to one of the masters in our spiritual hierarchy. And interesting enough, the man who was behind the light bulb, the electric light, was a Venusian. And another saying from them is that we are here to help to lift the earth into light. And another thing is that after the moon, Venus is the most the planet in our solar system that gives off the strongest light and most easily seen in the sky, because it conveys light to the physical eyes, but also in a higher way to inspire us, to lift us into light, to help us understand, into better understanding, and help us to grow spiritually. Because they say that, or other extraterrestrials also say that every civilization that has a very wide gap between the technological development and the spiritual development, too large gap, they are always in big trouble, like we are today. And we have to try to bridge that gap to become better persons, to be lifted up, to be inspired, that the love in our hearts become activated, and that we share the resources that this planet has, and that we look at all human beings as our brothers and sisters, and that we create the one humanity. That's the only way forward for this world, for humanity, if we want to have this planet, save this planet for future generation, and not destroy the future for humanity. And there's a very interesting quote from other extraterrestrials that came from the planet Coma Berenices in the star system Boötes. And this information was given to a contactee called Paul Villa in the 60s. And he had also extraordinary photographs of extraterrestrial spacecraft. Nobody else could have these clear and sharp photos and near-range photos. He was the first that could give the world such kind of evidence. But they said that love is the most profound force, powerful force in the universe, and that holds everything together. That means cooperation, unity, goodwill. It's all types of love, the love energy. And without that, everything falls apart. No relationship function without that energy. No society functions. It upholds everything. And if it used correctly, it can transform the hearts of men and make us function on a much higher level. When the law of love rules our planet and how we treat each other and how we take care of the environment and how we view all life on this planet, then extraterrestrial civilization will come. People from other civilizations will be among us and share their insights and help us and be here as brothers, like they do in many other worlds. And spiritual development, like you say it in a few words, that means that you become less competitive, less angry, less self-conscious, more kind, helpful, unselfish. And all kind of service where you do a good thing because it's a good thing to do, not because somebody wants to, you want to clap on the shoulder or to get praise, but you do it because you see it's necessary and it's a good thing to do. And meditation, a special form of meditation called transmission meditation, which is a very beneficial way of helping the world, because energies are stepped down through the chakras of the energy centers of the participants in this meditation, and is spread, then utilized in the world. And it's done by the masters of the spiritual hierarchy. They oversee this process and they send energy to each participant in a transmission group, and it speeds up on spiritual development. A very interesting contact person who has in contact with light beings and extraterrestrials, called Dorothy Isat, also says your inner light has to correspond with the light which is up there if you want to have contact with our brothers and sisters from other worlds. Okay, thank you.